Okay, so let's begin by defining what a scale is. A scale is simply a sequence of ordered pitches. Could be any number of pitches and any kinds of note patterns. You might be wondering, what kinds of scales are there? Well, there's too many to deal with in this video. Just looking at some of them, we have chromatic scales, we've got whole tone scales, pentatonic scales, even something called the Hungarian minor scale. But we're going to keep it simple. We're going to deal only with major and three forms of minor. Let's start with the major. This happens to be a C major scale, and I know it's a C major scale because of where we begin and because of the patterns of half and whole steps. If you notice, there's a half step between the third and fourth scale degree, and also one between the seventh and eighth scale degree. Some people make a point of memorizing the whole and half step pattern of the major and minor scale. While it's important to remember where those half steps are, I'm going to teach a system where you don't have to memorize that pattern, but you can build the scale knowing the components of each scale degree. Your job is to memorize where the half steps are in the scale. That will determine the accidentals that you use. You see, if we start with C and we move everything up without adding accidentals, the half steps are in the wrong place. You can see each time we move it up, the half steps change. And this is because we have not added accidentals. Here we are back to C, and the half steps are in the right location, between 3 and 4 and 7 and 8. So if we start on any note other than C, we must use accidentals to create the same pattern of whole and half steps. So just to review again, here is the whole and half step pattern with the half steps between 3 and 4 and 7 and 8. But let's begin with something a little bit easier than memorizing a pattern. Let's focus on unchanging intervals. In other words, there are certain intervals that don't change whether you're in major or minor, and we can build the scale knowing these first. Okay, our first unchanging interval is the perfect fifth from scale degrees 1 to 5. So when we look at the C major scale between the C and the G, it is a perfect fifth, and we remember that because of that phrase, space to space, line to line, accidentals match, perfect and fine. It's not a B, so we don't have to watch out for it. So that is a perfect fifth. Our second unchanging interval is the interval of a perfect fourth, which occurs between scale degree 1 and 4. Here in a C major scale, we see the C to F is a perfect fourth. And how do we know it's a perfect fourth? Because we remember that phrase. Line to space, space to line, accidentals match, perfect and fine. Our final unchanging interval is the major second between the first and second scale degree. So between C and D in the C major scale, or C minor scale, we're always going to find a major second. And if you recall, that major second is when two keys on the piano have a key in between them. Okay, so when you're building major or minor scales, regardless of what key you're in, you're going to be building a perfect fifth, a perfect fourth, and a major second between the first and fifth, fourth, and second scale degree. So let's practice one together. So let's start with the note D, and we're going to build either D major or D minor. And remember, those three intervals are the same regardless of major or minor. So we're going to start with the perfect fifth. And of course, space to space, line to line, we remember our phrase, and accidentals match, so that top note's going to be A. Now we're going to try the perfect fourth. Perfect fourth from D, if we remember our phrase, would be G. Accidentals are matching there. And then finally the major second, which would be the note E. So these three notes above the note D are both in the major and minor scale. Okay, let's try another one before we move on to the other scale degrees within major and minor. Let's start with the bottom note G, and we're going to start with the perfect fifth. Space to space, line to line, accidentals match, perfect and fine, but watch out for B's. And that note's going to be D, and that's a perfect fifth. And then we're going to move to the perfect fourth. space to line, accidentals match, perfect and fine, and that note's going to be C. A major second, the second scale degree above G. It's going to be two piano keys, G to G sharp to A. So A is our major second. So these notes are both in the scale of G major and G minor. All right, let's try just one more. Make sure you have this before we move on. Perfect fifth above E flat. Now remember, this has an accidental. So the note above that line to line, we are going to make sure that the accidentals match. So E flat to B flat is a perfect fifth. Same thing with the perfect fourth. We've got an accidental below, so the accidental above is going to have to match that, which would be A flat, correct. And then a major second above E flat, that's two piano keys, E flat to E natural to F. So F is our second scale degree in this E flat major or minor scale. So hopefully you have this down. Now we're going to move on to the other notes of the major scale, and then we'll deal with minor in a later video. Okay, so now we've discussed the three scale degrees that are the same whether you're in major and minor. Now let's just work on major scales, and we'll complete the major scale by finishing out the third, sixth, and seventh scale degree. Okay, so we're going to build a C major scale. We already have our three notes, the intervals that stay the same whether we're major or minor. Now we're going to start with the seventh scale degree, or the leading tone, which is always a half step away from the upper C here, which is the name of the scale. So we're going to remember that that's a half step. The next scale is the third scale degree, which, of course, if it's a major scale, is a major third away from the lowest note. And then finally, the sixth scale degree. Now here's where it's going to be a bit different. I think of the sixth scale degree as being a whole step away from the fifth scale degree. I think it's best to think about it that way, then you don't have to worry about really large intervals. So if you remember that in major, between the fifth and sixth scale degree is always a major second or a whole step. That will help you, I think, get the interval correctly. All right, let's try one with F as the starting note. So we're going to build the perfect fifth. F to C is a perfect fifth. And then we're going to look at the perfect fourth. Remember, line to space, space to line, accidentals match, perfect and fine. But in this case, we have to be careful because the bottom note is F. And remember, watch out for flies. So we have to make it one half step less. So F to B flat is a perfect fourth. Okay, on to the major second. That's the second scale degree. F to G is a major second. And so these are the three notes that are the same whether we're in major or minor. Now we're going to look at the leading tone, the seventh scale degree, which is a half step away from the top F. Then we're going to look at the third, and since we're writing a major scale, we're going to write a major third between the first and third scale degree. That would be an A natural. And then finally the sixth scale degree, which is a whole step or a major second away from the fifth scale degree. So C to D is a whole step. So you can see how important intervals are in constructing the scale. And if we look at this, we can see that, yes, the key signature of F major has one flat, which is B. And we can also see that the half steps are between the third and fourth scale degree and the seventh and eighth scale degree. So that's important to remember. So for your first assignment, I want you to work on the PDF page that I've uploaded that just talks about building scales, major scales. We'll deal with minor in the next video, but I want you to get used to building major scales from this process first. Okay, this is Dr. Sander. Keep it simple.